Alright, welcome back everyone. 皆さん、お帰りなさい。今日は304に、4日目です。It is day 304. Today is our second half of level 29. We did WaniKani second today because my lessons are at 9 p.m., which is about 36 minutes ago. Today is also Wednesday, so we actually have 7 new lessons that was either added or moved because Wednesday is update week. I hope this is like the new thing that they're doing. Every Wednesday seems like a pleasant surprise. I quite like it. We're gonna go over the 84, which is our entire stack of the ones that are going to be gurued. Technically, we gurued 2 or 4 things because of like a really long extended digression area. Let's get right into it. Should be quick on the current stuff, at least I think. Koichi. 逆つく腹立つね。Alright. 睡眠薬 Okay. ドキ Yup. What? Oh no, wait. Just kidding. 訪れる腹が減った。Okay. 痛みを痛み止めOkay. Blame. 道に迷う道に迷う道に迷う揃うOkay. 織物逆説再建誘う逆効果 Yakuko. Oh wait, I forgot. I need to put an opposite. Ikari. Harakiri. Harakiri. And banquet. Kyodai. Kyodai. Kyojin. 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 Shusai. Shusai. Oh no. Hold up. Sakarau. Sakarau is to oppose. Ryaku abbreviation. Inemuri. Inemuri. Wow. Nemuri kusuri. Nemuri gusuri.
Nemuri gusuri.
L for smart detention. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. Oh. First time seeing? Hello. That's kind of weird that that gets flagged. Taisho? Taisho this? I wonder if that's equivalent to... Oh, that's kind of cute. Actually, sorry, I was thinking of some English meme. Hello, konnichiwa. Sue... Sue... You're gonna have to help me out with your name. Yes. Suesel? Suesel? Swale? Suele? Suekel. Okay. Okay. Sufi. Oh, Swakel. Okay. Fair enough. Wakarimashita. Let's see. Sleeping potion. By the way, how's studying? Studying is pretty alright. Do you study Japanese as well? If so, how's that treating you?
Nemuru.
Excuse me. Oh, whoops.
不健康
Genko. Yeah, you're studying to... Okay. Yeah, the same. That's kind of a fun way to say same. uh... Hmm. In... Huh. In cut. Oh, wait. This is...
締め切り
Shimekiri. And those kanji gives you headaches? How are you boosting your... What are you doing? How do you go about your Japanese studying? Shimekiri. That's a funky drop for Shimekiri. Bakchi.
博打
Bakchi. On Korea. 効力.
効力
Or just effect. How do we back in? Maneki neko.
招き猫
Maneki neko. Meiwaku meru.
迷惑メール
Meiwaku meru. And onaka.
お腹
You change strategies if you get tired from one. That's understandable. That's a very common pattern. A few months ago, you played this game called Repo. I'm familiar with it. Then you joined small Japanese streamers to practice your Japanese and learn new words. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So are you currently doing that right now? You said a few months ago. So have you started changing strategies again? And how do you keep track of all your strategies? Do you have some sort of journal or some sort of overall upkeep? Or are you vibing? Are you constantly vibing from strategy to strategy?
Kirei.
Let's see. Hakubutsukan.
博物館
Noboru.
登る
Gekido.
激怒
Gekido. Gekido. Nenshutsu.
捻出
Nenshutsu. Oh, is this like to round up? How many strategies have you done? for Japanese learning? Can you tell me some about more than the more recent one? And have any learning lessons from all the different strategies? Saikoku.
捻挫
捻挫。極めて。
極めて
極めて。怒らせる。怒らせる。あ、怒らせる。怒らせるは。Or no, to anger someone. You don't have any structure when tracking your strategies, you just go what you feel is right? Sounds like the vibe strategy. Your current struggle is that many of the Japanese you know only comes out of your mind when typing, but not with speaking verbally, so you figure you must change your environment. Repo is limited to some words and scenarios, so you cannot really improve some of your weak points in casual speech. That's interesting. I think casual speech is going to feel like it's going to be a small pool to begin with because it is casual speech, but that's interesting that you can type certain things and not speak certain things. And do you speak differently at all when you're typing and you're speaking? Do you imagine different things, go through different processes? How do they contrast? So now you're gonna try to engage in Japanese with streamers. Is that fairly common? Like, are you able to find plenty of people to join? So I just realized how much you look like one. Huh. Interesting. So then I imagine, you know, is your Japanese beyond when you're typing and reading, are you doing anything beyond casual speech? Yeah, you look for streams on Twitch and ask if you can join. Some of their titles is labeled as, oh, okay. Yeah, you can participate. Yeah. That's kind of funny. That's also entirely in Chinese too. 参加型. Interesting. Yeah, participation. 参加生 probably. I usually read in my head now, so most of the time the three things are separate. So there's times that I can read the thing, know what it means, but I can know what it means without having to be able to read it, and then vice versa. So if someone says something to me, I can respond in English, and then it'll take me a while to respond in Japanese. But if I read Japanese, I can immediately know the meaning without knowing how to read the thing, vice versa. We kind of just do all of the things in separate and entering in different positions. Also, since I also practice Chinese and read Chinese, Chinese and Japanese overlap quite a lot with like titles and all that. So those three characters happen to line up really well with Chinese. Yeah. 参加 is 参加. Let's see. This is also what you notice during your repo days. You can understand what people are saying to you, but you can't reply. It is kind of frustrating. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. The thing about replying is that it, in Japanese, in my opinion, is it often deals with something that's not attached to. It doesn't necessarily have to attach to the thing that they're saying. However, and in Japanese, when you're talking about casual speech, it often you're not reflexive, so you don't repeat the things that they're asking in or what they're saying. It would be sounding like something like, "Hey, there's a tree." Yes, there is a tree. Situation, right? And then it would be kind of weird when you say that in casual speech. So you would say, "Yes, it is," and then sometimes it's like, "What is it is?" You didn't hear it very often. Right, so the thing you're hearing from the speaker or the person you're interacting with is exposing you to a lot of Japanese. So you're acquiring a lot of words, but their response is they're not responding to you. So you're not hearing the responses more often because you're not leading the conversation. So it's kind of like a bit asymmetrical. And that's where I feel, if I had to pinpoint where the frustration is that if you're doing a lot of listening most of the time, then all those things will be very familiar. But when you respond, it's not the things you're listening. You're listening something and you're responding with something different. Until you start asking the questions and like making observations and you hear them respond to you, then you'll over time hear what they typically respond. So when I vibe to vlogs and stuff, instead of listening for the content, like whatever they're responding to, I'm listening for their response. So I typically ignore a lot of things that what they're reacting to, but how they're reacting, and then that makes up for the lack of response. In Chinese, it's a slightly different actually. Chinese like repeating things. So outside of your yes and no, like you kind of repeat a lot of things. So when someone says like, "Oh, how are you doing? I'm doing well." So the only one change is well. That's a very you never thought of it that way. Maybe you could formulate a new strategy based on your explanation. Yeah, like I over time, like, thanks, Bree. Over time, I think finding all your catchphrases and whatnot, I think casual speech is very interesting because not everyone starts with casual speech. A large majority of people start with formal stuff, and then because they're so used to the formal stuff, you're learning all the important details, the things that he's talking about the tree and he's describing the person and stuff, but your response is like, "Oh man, I got it. Yes, I hear you. Wakarimashita." That kind of thing. Like, "Oh, mite," right? Like, look. That situation, those things only happen if you're saying something. So when you're saying something, then the Japanese person is responding. And then if you hear that more often, then those are your responses that you're getting. And it doesn't happen very often when you're learning because you don't say enough. You want someone else to say the things. And I think watching conversations happen, like only hearing or focusing on just what the Japanese person is responding to. So like if a chat person asks a question and then hearing that person's response, those are the things that you can say like, "Oh, I kind of like the way this person answered this troll's question." right? Like saying like, whoa, repo sucks. And then you hear the Japanese person respond. It's like, those are the stuff that you're hearing now, instead of worrying about what they're responding to, because you can say, oh yeah, that sounds like a mean thing. So how does a Japanese person respond? Like, oh, that's a cool thing. How does the Japanese person respond? And I think that's the stuff that kind of, it's a rare opportunity. And the way, if I have an opportunity to speak to someone, I would ask them like, what do you think about this? And then you show them a picture. Or what do you think about this? And show them a picture. Or like in a game, what do you think if I do this? So you can get like really stock questions. So I focused early on how to ask questions, and then the questions stay the same, right? Like, これは何ですか? 何これ? Like that type of thing. You're basically, you're pointing like, what is that? Like, what is this? How do you say that? Like, what I'm doing, can you tell me if I'm doing it right? That type of thing. So when it comes to like extracting responses, most of the time, if you have your questions down, all your common questions, you can learn like only a few questions, maybe 10 or so questions, and then it can be used for pretty much any example. Nani kore is great. It's like, what's that? Right? And then you just point to it. Or mite. Mite kudasai, right? Like, look, please. Like, mite, right? Like, a few commands that would say, over here, right? That kind of thing. At least that will get you a long mileage, and you wouldn't have to learn how like to respond dynamically. You would have stock questions that you can always use, and then get the Japanese person to respond to you. So then you'll hear it over and over again, and that you can vibe pretty hard. Like, every time you point to this thing, it's like, I forgot, shiranai, you know, like I forgot this word. What is it? You know, 何ですか? 言葉は何ですか? これは言葉は何ですか? Right? Or something like that, where like, this, what is the word for this? And you probably start then picking up more of how they respond to things. At least that's my quote-unquote hot take. And Chinese, is Chinese harder? It's as hard as you make it. I'm gonna give you a cop-out, kind of a cop-out answer to everything. Most of the time, the hardness is really relative to how enthusiastic you are. Chinese is a great companion for Japanese. So, like, for example, this character right here, this character is fear, right? But it's also Kong, which also means fear. So if you know Kong, you can use either a Japanese or Chinese leaping point for the two. So for you, if I had to say, if you're already interested in reading Japanese and whatnot, it's probably going to be less hard for you than anyone else. My parents are Chinese, and I am illiterate until like a few years ago in Chinese, but learning Japanese and Chinese side by side has a, if you think this can confuse you, then it's probably going to get harder. If you think this is useful, then it's probably going to get easier. So I like the idea that if I don't know what this character is, I still know what the Chinese meaning of it is, and I can connect those two. So, and you can do it pretty rapidly over time. And maybe here's another thing. Chinese is probably quote-unquote easier per se, largely because grammar is attached to the characters a lot of times. They're not outside of the characters. and they are also they use English grammar most of the time. The non-English part, like the part that may misconstrued English, it's attached to the characters. So when you see a character repeat in a position a lot of times, and that would be a non-English thing. And then the rest structure kind of flows fairly well with English. Am I a teacher? You like how I describe things? I used to teach things. Yes, I wanted to professionally teach things before. It was in science though. I'm not in language teaching. I have a PhD in molecular biology. It's been 7 years since I've stepped into a lab. However, one of the most rewarding aspects of being at a university was to teach. And when you're doing research, you kind of do that still, where when you're explaining things, you have to explain it like your research to, when you think of a TED Talk, or like when you're on a YouTube video and you watch like SciShow summarize things to a different audience. That's typically what I did as a professional. So explaining these things and using like diagrams and arrows, that's part of the education. Yeah. And I love hearing how other people are going about language learning, because I didn't grow up as a language learner. I am sort of multilingual already though. However, the languages I speak, the one that I speak most is a mother tongue that is not taught, so it's largely spoken. And my ear training deals with Spanish, Japanese, and Chinese. Mandarin, specifically Mandarin Cantonese, and Fujianese, which is what I speak with my parents. Yeah. I am a little bit, because of that, I'm a little bit different on how I imagine language, because my languages is that they're not separate things, they're the same things. So a lot of times that might come off as a little difficult to describe, and I try to work on it. Like, I don't see Japanese as its own thing. I see Japanese as its connection with English, Chinese, Spanish, and Fujianese, the languages I talk about. So a lot of times you would hear something like, oh, whenever you switch over to Japanese mode or switch over to Chinese mode, you have a code swap. You like switch personalities, or I typically don't. So, for example, ngoài na chỉ luôn gong hujiwa ngoài đi knowing cái nó mò biển ya chung gong wa guy using English while speaking, my personality doesn't really shift between languages. It usually just stays consistent. So that might be something that is kind of different from the way other people. You hear a lot about like Spanglish, like multilingual people who grow up around multilingual environments. They tend to weave in and out of languages out of convenience without a substantial shift in their compartmentalization. So typically, whenever I think about how people interact with languages, I try to think about what they're interacting with on a daily basis. And that's the reason why I think the hearing responses over and over again is the thing that you're probably looking to practice, because that's the thing that's missing sort of from the environment you have. Yeah. Vibing is an interesting way, like fully immersion vibing strategies for language acquisition. The nice thing about that is pure exposure and dynamics is sufficient to gain a conversational level of language. The downside, like the con, sort of, the thing that you have to work on is trying to find a clever way to trigger the information to happen more consistently. Because when you're vibing and you're immersing, you don't necessarily have control over the thing you want to hear, or the thing that you may want to hear consistently. So it requires you to be proactive. While a lot of people who pick up a second language, they use passive things that they have control over. So like flashcards, textbooks, speaking to a teacher, that kind of thing. Those are passive things because the person and the resource is there for you to determine what to learn. Your way is definitely more of what I would say closer to how I learned language when I was growing up. Fujianese is not taught, so the only way I can ever learn it is from my parents. So speaking to my parents and other people are the only source. The only source of acquiring the language. You wish you have those skills you have for how you speak. You're really not good at talking to people, regardless of the language. Having social anxiety kind of drags you down on your language learning. All you can ever do at the moment is to listen and observe. Absolutely. I talk about this. In the last, I started formally like sharing this stuff 2 years ago and picking up language learning. The first thing I highlight is what you're speaking of. It is great that you understand that, though. I think a lot of people don't understand that until much, much later into their language learning. That one of the social anxiety, the thing that they're putting off, is kind of going to be a really big hindrance. So the communication skills. I don't have like a TLDR on how one can overcome social anxiety and developing communication skills. Ultimately, though, one thing I typically say is that finding someone, something, some medium that you find, even talking out loud, like streaming or something like that, with that practice, that can alleviate a lot of potential social anxiety moving forward. So what I typically do when I'm studying, by the way, before you mention anything, you're not distracting me from my studying. I actually do this deliberately to talk to people about how they're going about their language learning, because my main focus is learning and communication skills. So this would be a great example where the way you're talking to me now, like you're typing this out, you wish you have those skills that I have. You're not really good at talking to people regardless of the language. Being able to explain that aspect to me. So I'm probably going to ask you some questions now, like what is it part of the talking to people in your native language, say your English. I imagine English is one of your primary common languages. If you're able to explain to someone else who's interested, like you have someone around you, right? If you have someone around you who like to share in the anxiety or share in maybe a good friend or someone, and they are able to ask questions about you, and then you're able to exchange questions about them, encouraging yourself to want to explain things to someone you care about, or express it in some way, like maybe writing a book or like writing in a journal or something. If you can articulate that in your mind and then you can vocalize it to anyone or to a mirror or to a recording device, eventually I think that's a great bridge to overcoming social anxiety. Because one of the things is, if I asked you, how was your day? And you've already written in a book and you've already recorded it somewhere, you repeat that. So you're not necessarily coming up with the stuff on the spot. And practice like that gives a great vibing way. So I know you've expressed that you're more of a viber, right? I'm more of a viber. So doing stuff is the way, right? We want to focus on doing stuff. And one of the things that I typically suggest, if you have something, say you have an interest, and your interest is repo right now, right? So when you are done with your repo session, let's say you took a session, then you can write your thoughts, and you've already said you have a strength in writing instead. You can choose to write in Japanese if you want. Write in English plus Japanese. So you can write whatever your thoughts are using the Japanese you already know, and then substituting English. Sorry, that's not how you abbreviate English. English whenever it's necessary. So you could have something like the word is, I don't know, kirei, right? Right. The word is kirei in your journal or something. The idea is now you're able to have a thought that you're practicing. So you're outputting the practice. And in the future, when someone asks you, hey, what new word you learn? Oh, the word is kirei. So you don't know, let's say you don't know kotoba and then wa, right? Kotoba wa kirei. Kirei desu if you're doing formal stuff. The idea is you know now which words you have and which words you don't have. And you can practice that without anyone, right? You don't need anyone to be there. And in the future, you immediately from that practice, you can say something and you wouldn't have to feel anxious, or it would still be anxious and inducing, but it would be lessened because you have a bunch of thoughts that you already have done and be prepared for. The conversation that we're having now, when I'm like, oh, you said I can read your mind like an open book, that is something that I'm reading from my old self. My younger self, all of this is still true when I was younger. I'm 38, by the way. So when I'm saying I'm younger, I'm talking about something that happened 20 years plus ago. You can learn and know a lot of things. However, putting things in your own word, in your own words, without anyone around, is one of the great, like a very consistent bridge to saying, okay, now someone's in front of you, but you've already put so many things in your own word, and you can use your Japanese. You can encourage yourself to integrate your Japanese and your English. So if you can find some way of making your interest, your current vibe, and integrate a habit, maybe at night after the day's over, you can, I don't know, draw a picture if you want to draw a picture, or write some notes about your day, and the day explains things in your own words. So you're not copying and pasting. You're more like, all right, so what did I like about today's session about repo? Write it in English and Japanese, as much Japanese as you can, and English. And eventually you'll realize, in my opinion, you'll intuit, you'll vibe what words you're looking for. So eventually you hear an English word that comes up a lot next to a Japanese word. And what happens is, okay, I really need to find out what these Japanese words for these are, because it's next to this Japanese word all the time. So then when you're speaking, hopefully your social anxiety is not spending more time trying to come up with the words, because you've already done it. And now you're using your Japanese and Chinese and Japanese and English, listening and looking for those phrases. So for me right now, I'll give you an example. The thing I'm talking to you about, I spent more than 7 years working on. The idea of social anxiety that's linked to communication skills, that deals with the current state of the internet hustle culture, and how talking and communication is at someone and not with someone. And then people don't actively listen and extract information while responding in real time. So like dynamic communication, right? Dynamic communication. Most of the time communication is pre-practiced. or reactionary. You're reacting to most things. And this stuff is nerve-wracking because when you're reacting to something, it's an emotional response most of the time. Pre-practice is a thing that I feel that you and a lot of younger people, I'm assuming you're on the younger side, can practice those and use it as a way to leap into dynamic communication. So you can create ideas on the fly. Like right now, if you tell me something about yourself, I would be able to explain the things that I practiced that is true about a lot of things, but maybe not true about you. However, I only need to adjust that little detail while I'm saying it. So pre-practicing can help you with not necessarily completely reliant on reacting. It can help you feel comfortable. Like when you say hello, that's something that you practiced a lot. So when you say hello, it feels like there's no anxiety behind it. And then afterwards, when someone asks you a question, like, how's your day? You can be prepared to say, how's your day? If you already thought about it in your journal. Or I could ask you, what have you been up to recently? What have you done yesterday, right? We haven't talked yesterday. And in some way, if you had some way of writing down something, it's even the smallest amount of habit or practice will make it sound like, oh, I already know this. I practice this. It's in the back of my head. Like, I think about what I did yesterday at the end of the day every night. So if someone asks me what happened yesterday, what happened 2 days ago, tell me something interesting that happened to you last week. You have something already that you've already expressed. So oftentimes, if you want a vibe answer from, at least from my perspective on like social anxiety, a journal is fantastic. Or maybe a list of music you listen to. So your YouTube algorithm, your smartphone, your watch list, your anime list, etc. has trackers. So you can write about those things, or you can think about those things. So when someone asks you, how's your day? You can think of your Netflix list or your anime list. And then you can go even further and say, okay, I liked that anime. So let's talk about that anime instead. And those are the things, in my opinion, that I spend most of my time encouraging people with social anxiety to try to do. You can pre-practice a lot of things, and hopefully that leads to vibing your other information. It's a great way to start a conversation, spin the conversation, so that you can get more you can get more familiar with your social anxiety limits. Anxiousness does come from being unprepared, right? Oftentimes the source of anxiousness is constantly feeling like you're unprepared. What happens if the conversation goes silent? What happens if I don't have the words for it? Well, you have some words for it. Trying to find a way to practice them is a great starting point. Your speaking for French is so much worse than your reading writing because you really don't talk to people and you're often too nervous to put yourself out there for study buddies. Yeah, I think, hear me out, Brie. Like, if you don't really like to talk to people, explain that in French. And then, in my opinion, the next time you talk to someone, you can explain it in French. It would still be less nervous than not being able to explain it. That's kind of the central part of starting. How do you start? Because if you really want to get there someday, you gotta start with the things you know. So you probably already know why you really don't talk to people. So the next step is you can say it in English. You can also say it in French. And then If you run out of ideas and say you're stuck at don't talk to people, then you can use English to explore why you don't really like to talk to people. Then you can explain it in French. So the next time you meet someone who speaks French, you can explain the things you already know as a way to discover new things in the target language. And that's, at least in my opinion, that's the closest thing to learning like a kid before, immersion. That's the closest thing that people talk about when they talk about immersion. But now you're actively learning. You are choosing your words to lead a discussion to gain more information. So when you finally found an ability to feel like you can lead a discussion because you've already practiced it a bunch of times, that nervousness is at least dampened. I'm not going to say it ever goes away. I don't think social anxiety and nervousness ever goes away. The idea is you can actually prepare and prep questions. The first thing I did for did I ever tell you this? Did I ever tell you this? I'm not sure if you were here, but I've told someone this. When I was younger than 18, I got A+, for my speeches because I memorized my speech. I literally wrote every single word, gesture, and action, and I practiced it until I got it. So I even had timing. I wrote a script for myself when I was younger. That's where I started. I wrote a script, and so you don't have to go this hardcore, obviously. And not everyone has this time. And if you're older and you have a lot of responsibilities, there's a lot of already emotional baggage, right? Like you have emotional things you have to tether. When I was younger, I was emotionally stunted. Like I was stunted emotionally. So I didn't have that problem of shame or insecurities about memorizing my speech or afraid that people would think I'm robotic or something. I did what I could do. I don't settle and think about all the things I can't do right now. Like I didn't have the ability to sound charming or charismatic or coming up with improv humor on the spot. I did what I can. Right? This is what I can do. So what I did was I wrote every word, every gesture, every action. It got me to speaking. It encouraged me to start using speech. Then eventually it led to other things. So definitely when anxiety is a problem and if anxiety becomes dysfunctional, right? And yes, this might sound cliche. You either have someone be able to help you, that's a loved one, a family who knows this anxiety well, right? If you don't have that, then of course you still have yourself. And yourself, if you're already making sentences, speaking in English or what have you, you have things you can do for the time being until maybe someone comes along, like you meet your mate for life or a great person who just likes hanging around with you. You have similar interests. Until that comes around, right? There's a bit of a luck element here. There are so many things you can do in yourself to do that. I did not care if I sounded robotic. I had a starting position, right? And I did it well. I had the actions that I had. I don't have like a Word document of these things. I literally have introduction, breathe for 10 seconds, say the abstract, wait for questions for like 30 seconds. If these particular questions, I had contingencies, like where in my presentation will questions likely come up. I still actually use lots of these strategies when I'm working with something that I'm entirely out of my element. So I prepare all of these things. And at some point, they no longer feel like they're imitations. They're more like part of your toolkit. So yes, I can write a screenplay. That's why I was interested in direction and being a director. I was legitimately writing screenplays for myself. Whenever I have to give a presentation, it was in the form of a screenplay or dictation. And you can do that too, of course. You're gonna make me speak French with you when you start learning. I like your idea of writing stuff down. Yeah, start there. There have been cases where you can say something but was afraid of it being wrong, not even though it is not, so you refrain from speaking. Yeah, that's that's the additional emotional baggage that I was talking about. And that requires, I feel oftentimes that deals with the element of mutual trust, which I think, to me, without saying too much, it's a bit downstream. So when you start being less anxious, when you're able to find your magical combination of encouraging yourself to be less anxious, and then you're involved in more discussions, that vibe of feeling trust, I think most humans will begin to intuit signals for trust. That whole idea of refraining from speaking and speaking like how personal you want to get, what level you're on, and that's downstream of this. So I would say a lot of the effort is up front and trying to encourage yourself to engage in speaking. This is a bit of a trust me situation, and I don't really like trust me situations. I'll say this very lightly. When you focus on how to initiate, lead, and respond, eventually your experience takes over for like that feeling of being afraid whether you're going to say the right thing or the wrong thing, because largely you've done it so often. It's kind of like playing a game where, let's say you play a Souls-like game, right? And you've already played Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and then you're entering Elden Ring. You have lots of legacy skills. You've done them a lot. And that's how you can play another game. You can play Elden Ring because you have so many legacy skills, but they're not going to be exactly the same, right? And that's where the nervousness can come in. Maybe even performance anxiety. Speaking and communication is a performance art, so it has performance anxieties. And one of the performance anxiety is the concern if you're saying the right thing, right? Executing the right maneuvers in Elden Ring. You can read some of it, but they're going to be slightly different. So, but when you play the game, eventually your experience, the experience you vibe, make it so that when you reflect upon it, like after like the 100th run, you reflect upon it, it's like, I don't understand why I was nervous before. It's pretty much the same, but with a bit of adjustment from Dark Souls 1, 2, 3 to Elden Ring. Speaking and communication can be viewed that way from someone who's not like analytical. Like if you don't want to analyze any of these things, the idea is if you are unable to consistently gain experience since you're reliant on vibing, right? Immersion. Find how you can enable yourself to gain more experience, and then the general consensus is you trust the process, right? This is trusting the process. unless somehow I'm convincing you that being analytical, like what I did, is super interesting and you want to change your life like that, that would be too much of an ask. So the way I got over it was analytically doing it. However, since you're mentioning how you're vibing and you're, switching between strategies all the time, experience is the TLDR against anxiety. And if you are able to address being able to put yourself more often in a situation and executing it, regardless if it's right or wrong in the sense of what you're thinking, if you can execute it, your experience will make you trust yourself and the whatever the condition is. And it's hard because the longer you don't do that, the harder it will be over time. And I don't know, obviously, your background. You might have spent many, many years already. There are other routes to doing this, but you don't strike me right now as the analytical type, because the other analytical people can find ways of hard practicing and then executing on that and then getting that. If you're vibing, the least, I would say, the major focus is how do you get more experience? And that's what I meant by the strategy about hearing responses. Since if you're having trouble figuring out how to respond to someone properly, then think about creative ways that you can think about in your interest and whatnot. Since I don't know you, I don't know your interest in what you do on a regular basis. Find a way to expose yourself to other people's responses, and then you can sponge off that exposure. For example, I'll tell you one thing from my younger years. I learned how to smile before knowing what being happy is. Smile but not happy. I saw a lot of people, they smile when someone tells a joke or what is a joke. Like, I have to tell myself what is a joke. So I need to figure out what a joke is. And then when someone is joking, if everyone else is kind of like making this face, I learned to smile when, right? And for vibing, that's what you're looking for. So all the things that you have trouble with, you have to understand the nature of your anxiety. What is triggering your anxiety? And then you can go and you're going to try to use your creativity and find a source of exposure for that. And that's what I think a vast majority of internet goers, people who are chronically online, require. So if you can define in a journal or something, describe your anxiety, right? And then you go find where you can gain more XP by like observing, right? You said observing and listening are what you do best, which it makes sense. If you can describe your source of anxiety, then you know what to look for the experience. And that experience is what you'll sponge, because you're so much better at observing and listening. So if you're having trouble responding in Japanese, for example, what's a clever way to hear a lot of responses in Japanese? And my first thought is, you already do repo. So the next time you hop in the stream, come with prepared questions. And prepared questions that you have trouble answering. So one source of anxiety is oftentimes you already know what triggers your anxiety. You know it really well. Write out those situations. And then instead, you become the situation for the person. So say if someone asks you, do you like this game? Do you like this game, right? And that was the last question you couldn't answer because you were anxious, you don't know what to say, you're not sure what to say. Use this and ask your repo streamer, do you like this game? Or what do you like about this game? And then you can use their answer to add to your journal or your notes. And if you ask enough people, do you like this game? Like another Japanese streamer or another person, eventually you'll get a lot of examples of how to answer, do you like this game? And in your head, you'll intuit it. Like, oh yeah, you know, I've heard this response a lot now. I don't need to think about it. There's no anxiousness because you've already heard it so many times. So one way to go about it, and this is the least analytical possible, because I know how boring it is if you're gonna go and I don't want to track my calories, or I don't want to, I just want the general idea. So anything that makes you anxious, in my opinion, describe it and flip the script and then see how other people interact. Then you're literally listening and observing to how they interact. So if initiating if you're initiating a conversation, if this is making you anxious, I'm not sure if this is making you anxious. I hope I'm not making you anxious. I'm speaking a little bit quickly. If this is making you anxious, write about what it is that makes it like anxious. Like, are you being pressured or not? Or you can also write, if I'm not making you anxious, what is it about me that makes you not as anxious?